They fined me $750 for repainting my porch the exact same shade it had always been, then posted a public notice claiming property ownership under review. 48 hours later, a stranger's truck sat in my driveway with a clipboard and a camera. Welcome to HOA Disputed. I'm Mark Ellis, a surveyor out of Spokane who thought buying my late father's lake cabin would mean peace. If you're new here, subscribe so these cases reach you first. And tell me where you're watching from. I like seeing the map fill in. That morning smelled of pine sap and wet soil, the kind of air that used to make my dad say the world could still fix itself if you gave it room. I'd inherited his cabin 3 years ago, after the cancer took him. My plan was simple: renovate slowly, weekend by weekend, keep it as a promise to my daughter. But the Pinecrest Lakes HOA had other plans. The notice came folded into my mailbox like a threat. Unauthorized color alteration, Section 12.4 violation. Same tan paint my father used since 1987, only fresher. I called the number on the letterhead. A woman's voice answered, brisk and superior. Mr. Ellis, we've had several complaints. This community values consistency. Consistency, I said. The paint code's identical. Well, she replied, ownership records can be complex. We'll need to verify your deed. That's when I realized they weren't after a color. They were after the house. I drove straight to the HOA office, a prefab trailer beside the mail kiosk. The board president, Karen Dalton, met me outside, arms crossed like a foreman. Mid-50s, manicured, all beige tones and control issues. You'll need to vacate until we sort this out, she said, smiling as if eviction were customer service. I've paid taxes on that parcel since the day my father died. Paperwork gets outdated. We just want to keep everyone safe from title disputes, she acted shout. Uli winked at the word safe. That night, I sat at the kitchen table flipping through Dad's old files. Deed, title, tax receipts, everyone flawless. Still, a flicker of doubt crept in. Could some clerical mess really put me out? My daughter Lily called from Seattle asking if she could visit next weekend. I lied, said the place needed more repairs. Truth was, I didn't want her to see men measuring our fence line. 3 days later, a white van with HOA compliance stenciled on its doors rolled up the gravel drive. 2 men stepped out, started photographing the siding without introducing themselves. I filmed them from the porch, making sure the date stamp was clear. Knowledge nugget number 1. In most U.S. states, an HOA's inspection authority ends at the property boundary unless the owner grants entry. Anything beyond that can constitute trespass, especially if photographs include interiors through windows. When I mentioned that statute, the older inspector laughed. Tell that to Karen, he said. They drove off, leaving tire ruts like signatures of disrespect. That night, I met my neighbor Frank Rivera, a retired building inspector who still wore a belt heavy with tools out of habit. He'd fought the HOA before over a wheelchair ramp for his wife. They think the covenants are scripture, he said, handing me a thermos of coffee. But the county recorder's office holds the real Bible. You get your chain of title certified yet? I hadn't, so we spent the next morning downtown, poring over dusty books that smelled of toner and mildew. The chain was clean, no gaps, no liens. Still, one entry caught Frank's eye, a supplemental maintenance easement from 1996 giving the HOA temporary upkeep rights around shoreline lots. Expired in 2006. That's their ghost clause, Frank muttered. Bet you anything they never removed it from their records. If he was right, the HOA's cease liam of ownership review might rest on a void clause, but I needed proof. By sunset, Karen had escalated. I returned to find a notice to cure taped to my door, $1,500 fine, suspension of community privileges, and a hearing date set in 10 days. Beneath the signature line, failure to comply may result in property reassignment procedures. Property reassignment. That phrase hit like a brick. My father's cabin, the dock he built plank by plank, could vanish into a bureaucratic black hole because of some power-drunk committee. Frank offered a slow whistle. They're bluffing. They can't seize a deed, but they can sure scare the uninformed into selling cheap. I spent that night cataloging every document, photographing each with my phone, tagging them by date and clause. I created a digital archive on a cloud drive labeled HOA War, Evidence A. When I finally looked up from the screen, dawn was leaking over the lake, and I'd barely blinked. I knew what had to come next. A deep dive into their filings. HOAs file annual statements with the State Corporation Division. If Karen was abusing her role, it would show there, in signatures, not speculation. Before logging off, I said quietly to my father's photograph on the mantel, "They picked the wrong family this time." The floorboards creaked like an answer. Frank's truck rattled as we turned out of the county lot. He gripped the wheel like it owed him money. "You see what they're doing, right? If they log that old easement as active, they can claim shared maintenance rights, then slide in under common area language. It's an old scam." I stared at the dash, replaying Karen's smug half-smile. So they fake a community maintenance clause and take over property? Not fake, just never clean their books. Sloppy or crooked, same result. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moon cut a path across the lake, silver as a scalpel. I started drafting a timeline on a yellow pad. March 12th, paint job. March 1st, 5, notice. March 18th, inspection. March 20th, cure notice. 10 days to hearing. It felt surgical, every date a stitch or incision. The next morning, I made my first call to the state corporate registry. The woman on the line sounded tired. "Pinecrest Lakes HOA," she said, typing. "Last annual filing was 2021. No renewal since." My pulse jumped. "You mean they're delinquent?" "Technically, yes. They're in administrative default, not dissolved, but no legal standing until they refile." I thanked her, hung up, and sat very still. Knowledge nugget number 2. In most U.S. states, a homeowners association that fails to file its annual corporate report loses its legal standing to enforce fines or covenants until reinstated. Actions during default can be voidable. The first tremor of hope flickered. If the HOA had been operating without authority, every fine and citation since 2021 was smoke. Still, I needed to verify. Paper, not phone calls. Frank came over with his thermos and his old Nikon. "We'll need photos of every posted notice, every tag, date stamped." We spent hours shooting each letter pinned to my fence. The soft clicks echoed like evidence being built. By midday, I drove to the city clerk's office and paid for certified copies of their corporate record. 5 pages, blue seal, time-stamped 11:34 a.m. That document was a grenade waiting for the right moment. When I pulled into my driveway, Karen's SUV blocked the gate. She stepped out, wearing aviators, clipboard in hand. "You can't park there," she said. "I live here. Pending verification, you reside here. There's a difference. I just came from the state office. You're in default." She laughed, a brittle sound. "We have grace periods. You've had 2 years. Her smile faltered, but only for a heartbeat. "You don't understand governance, Mr. Ellis. We'll see you at the hearing." She slid the sunglasses back. On, like armor. 2 hours later, the HOA's Facebook page posted a photo of my cabin captioned, "Unregistered occupant violating community order." Comments poured in. "Shame. Eyesore. Get him out." I called my attorney, Lacey Chen, a municipal lawyer with ink stains on her cuffs and a voice that could slice marble. "They're impersonating authority," she said. "Send me everything. I'll draft a cease and desist and a tortious interference warning." She paused. "But you'll need to decide if you want quiet resolution or public correction. The first gets you peace. The second gets you change." "Change," I said. "I'm done hiding." Early next morning, I printed a 22 by 17 color map of the development, highlighting every parcel line in red. The HOA's common area claim didn't even reach my fence. I taped it to a corkboard beside the fireplace, next to the certified record and the timeline. My war room. Frank studied it, nodding slowly. "You're building a case, not a fight. Good. Keep it clean. Keep it legal." Halfway through coffee, he asked, "You ever thought why she's so obsessed with your cabin?" "No. She's been trying to secure the lakeshore for some development deal. Tiny event lodge, they say. Your dock's right in her blueprint." That landed like an anchor. I could almost hear my dad's laugh. "Son, always follow the money." I filed an anonymous request with the County Planning Department under the Public Records Act. 3 days later, a brown envelope arrived. Proposal drafts for Pinecrest Lakes Community Pavilion, dated last year. Signatory, Karen Dalton, HOA President. Project Footprint overlapped directly onto my lot. When I showed Lacey, she smiled. Conflict of interest. Textbook. We'll hold it until the hearing. You want to see them sweat? Let them talk first. Why wait? Because timing wins wars. Late that night, I stood on the porch, listening to the frogs hum through the trees. A calm came over me, the kind you feel right before something irreversible. If you've ever dealt with an HOA like this, tell me in the comments what tactic finit Ellie stopped them. Or, if you're on an HOA board, leave your perspective. I promise to read every one. The next morning, Karen sent me a certified letter. Final notice of hearing. Failure to cure. May 5th, 10 o'clock a.m., Community Hall. Perfect. A date, a stage, an audience. By the time May 5th rolled around, I'd memorized every clause in the covenants and every smirk Karen ever gave me. The hearing was set in the Community Hall, a boxy structure with fluorescent lights that buzzed like they resented being awake. Folding chairs formed rows facing a cheap podium. At least 20 neighbors filled the room, half curious, half hostile. Karen stood at the front, flanked by 2 board members in matching blazers. The compliance officer, a guy named Russ, flipped through a binder thick enough to choke a printer. When he spoke, it was with rehearsed authority. Mr. Ellis, this proceeding concerns your violation of Article 12.4 regarding exterior paint and potential non-compliance with property ownership verification. I stayed standing. Let's begin with ownership. You say potential. Show me the basis. He gestured toward Karen, who smiled tightly. Our internal records indicate ambiguity in your title due to an outstanding maintenance easement. Until clarified, the HOA retains oversight authority. Frank, sitting 2 rows back, muttered, "Here it comes." I slid a manila folder onto the table. Certified chain of title, county seal, no liens, no encumbrances. Easement expired May 12, 2006, recorded in county archives. Karen's jaw shifted. Regardless, the HOA is in administrative default, I interrupted, holding up the state filing certificate. No standing to enforce any provision or convene disciplinary hearings until reinstated. A ripple moved through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Wait, what?" Karen blinked, then leaned toward the mic. Mr. Ellis is misinterpreting the administrative process. I laid down the second document, a printout of the state's response dated last week. Straight from the Division of Corporations. Your corporate status: inactive, non-compliant. You're not an HOA right now. You're a group of neighbors with stationery. Gasps. Russ looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. Karen's voice cracked for the first time. "You can't just—" "I can," I said. And I did. Everything you've issued since 2021, voidable, including my fines. That's when the county deputy at the back stepped forward. Neutral authority, plain and silent. "He's correct," he said calmly. "Until corporate reinstatement, enforcement authority is suspended. You can't fine or file liens." Karen's face turned the color of brick. She tried to pivot. "Then we'll resume once reinstated. You're still in violation." I smiled slightly. "Maybe. But you'll be answering for selective enforcement when that happens. I've logged 22 identical paint jobs with no citations." Knowledge nugget number 3. Selective enforcement occurs when an HOA applies rules inconsistently among owners, undermining its own authority. Courts often invalidate those actions entirely. The meeting adjourned in chaos. Some neighbors came up quietly afterward, shaking my hand. Others avoided eye contact. Karen marched out without looking back. Outside, the late afternoon sun cut long shadows across the gravel lot. Frank clapped my shoulder. "That was a hell of a first punch." "Not the last," I said, because as satisfying as it felt, it wasn't over. Lacey called that night. "They'll retaliate. Expect nuisance inspections or code complaints. Be ready." She was right. Within 48 hours, the county received 3 anonymous reports. Unsafe dock, unapproved septic modifications, and fire hazard debris. Each triggered a visit from a different inspector. By week's end, my mailbox overflowed with notices. None stuck, but they ate time and sleep. If you've ever faced this kind of petty harassment, you know it's never about the fines. It's about fatigue. Tell me below, what's the most ridiculous violation you've seen? I'm collecting stories for a follow-up piece. I kept my composure. Each inspection, I greeted politely, logged badge numbers, photographed timestamps, and filed reports with Lacey. We built a folder labeled Pattern of Retaliation. Late one evening, as rain hissed over the porch roof, Lily called again. "Dad, why don't you just sell it? You sound tired." I watched the lake shimmer under the stormlight. "Because he built it with his hands," I said. "And people like her think that gives them the right to take it." She went quiet, then softly. Grandpa would have liked that answer. After the call, I stared at the evidence board. Something new was forming in my head. A map not of property, but of leverage. Karen's development proposal depended on access to the lake. My dock was the only legal route from the road to the shore wide enough for construction vehicles. I checked the county GIS maps again. Parcel 14B, mine, controlled the only 30-foot access easement to the water. Every other stretch was wetlands under environmental restriction. Frank saw me tracing the lines. "What's that grin for?" "I just realized," I said. "She can't build without me." That was the moment I knew I had my first real card to play. The grin didn't leave my face all night. It wasn't joy. It was the quiet click of gears falling into place. The next morning, I drove out early to the assessor's office. The clerk, a man with hair like static and a coffee-stained tie, slid a parcel map across the counter. I pointed to the shaded area hugging the shoreline. "That's the community easement, right?" He squinted. "Not anymore. That was vacated back in 2004 when the county. I rezoned for shoreline preservation. Only surviving access to the water is through 14B. That's me." He nodded. "Then you've got something they want. Don't let them bully you off it." By the time I got home, the rain had stopped, leaving the grass shiny and flattened. I stood on the dock, the boards creaking under my boots, watching sunlight punch holes in the clouds. Karen's development dream couldn't happen without trucks rolling right past my mailbox, and that gave me leverage. Frank stopped by carrying a box of glazed donuts. "So, what's next, General?" I tore a donut in half and grinned. "We bait them. Let them overreach." That week, I filed a quiet quitclaim deed transfer to an entity called Shoreline Management LLC. Registered agent, my attorney, Lacey. No one outside our circle knew I'd moved ownership into a protective shell. The LLC's single-purpose clause: to preserve public access and environmental compliance along the 14B shoreline. Knowledge nugget number 4. In many states, property owners can assign or transfer parcels into limited liability entities for protection against harassment or false claims. The deed, once recorded, becomes a matter of public record, but the beneficial ownership may remain private. 3 days later, Karen sent an email blast to all residents. Exciting news. Pinecrest Lakes Pavilion project back on track pending shoreline cooperation. Cooperation. My cooperation. The following afternoon, I found tire tracks pressed deep into the soft dirt near the dock gate. Someone had forced the padlock. I walked the path. Fresh footprints, heavy tread, maybe work boots. I took photos, placed a tape measure by the indentations for scale, then called the county sheriff. Deputy Mason arrived within the hour, notebook in hand. "Looks like criminal trespass," he said. "You want to press charges?" "Not yet. Let's document it first. I think they'll hand me something bigger if I wait." The next HOA newsletter arrived that Friday. Community W, Orc Day, Shoreline Cleanup, sponsored by HOA. Set for Sunday, 9 a.m., my dock circled in red. I almost laughed out loud. Sunday morning came bright and loud. 2 trucks rolled up, tailgates full of tools, HOA volunteers hopping out in matching t-shirts. Karen supervised with a clipboard, barking orders. I filmed from the porch. When they started unloading wheelbarrows onto my side of the fence, I called out, "You're trespassing." She barely looked up. "This area's under community jurisdiction now. You can join in if you'd like to help." I stepped forward, camera still rolling. "This parcel belongs to Shoreline Management LLC, filed and recorded Tuesday. You're operating without permission." She froze mid-step. "You did what?" "Transferred ownership. Any construction here now falls under corporate trespass statutes. You might want to step back." Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, fear replaced arrogance. "You're bluffing." Deputy Mason's cruiser rolled up behind her, lights flicking once before cutting off. "Not bluffing," he said. "I've seen the filing. He handed her a copy of my new deed. "Ma'am, I suggest you clear your volunteers before I start writing citations." Karen's jaw worked, but no words came out. She signaled her people to pack up. The trucks rattled away one by one, and the sound of gravel under tires felt like victory. Frank let out a low whistle from his porch across the street. "That's check, buddy. Not mate, but check." I nodded. "We're close." Still, Karen wasn't finished. The next morning, anonymous social posts claimed my LLC was a front for a real estate scam. Fake screenshots, doctored signatures, the works. Within hours, I got a letter from the HOA attorney demanding disclosure of all beneficial owners of the entity. Lacey called me before I could even open it. "They're panicking. Don't respond yet. Let them escalate." That night, I wrote in my notebook, Phase 2, Exposure. The ink bled slightly into the paper, black veins spreading across the page. Every good reform starts with sunlight. Here's a question for you. How far should an HOA's authority reach beyond common grounds? Property line or homeowner's door? Where's your limit? Leave your line in the comments. I'm curious how you see it. Karen's limit, apparently, was none. The following evening, I returned home to find a temporary stop work notice taped to my mailbox, county seal forged in low-resolution print. I compared it to a real one from my files. Wrong font, missing signature. The arrogance was almost impressive. "Forgery," Lacey said when I sent her photos. "That's a felony. We'll hold it for the public reveal." A date was already on the calendar. June 2nd, the HOA's annual election meeting. The perfect stage. June 2nd came wrapped in thunderclouds, the kind that grumble for hours before breaking. I parked outside the community hall early, watching the lot fill with SUVs and golf carts, residents clutching folded ballots. Inside, a banner read, "Annual Elections Community Updates." Karen stood near the podium, smiling for every handshake like a politician on borrowed time. Frank slid into the seat beside me with his thermos. "Storm's coming," he said. "Outside or inside?" He chuckled. "Both." When the meeting started, Karen launched into her speech about unity and progress. Every word was a layer of varnish over rot. She pointed to a projector slide showing a mock-up of the proposed pavilion. "This will increase property values by 15%, she said, pending cooperation from shoreline stakeholders. Stakeholders. That was me. I let her talk. Lacey had advised patience. "Let her frame the narrative first," she'd said. "Then flip it." When Karen finally paused for questions, I raised my hand. "You're quoting projected values from an unapproved development, correct?" "Correct," she said carefully. "And that development uses parcel 14B as its only access point?" A beat. "That's under negotiation." I stood up. "No, it's not, because Shoreline Management LLC, of which I am the managing member, has not and will not grant access. And before we go further, this stop work notice you've been waving around?" I lifted the forged paper. "It's fake. No county signature. No registry number." Murmurs filled the hall. Karen's voice tightened. "Mr. Ellis, you're out of order." Deputy Mason, standing by the door, stepped forward again. "No, ma'am, he's right. We verified the forgery last week. It's now under investigation." The room erupted. Someone shouted, "Who forged it?" Another voice. "Was that even legal?" Karen tried to shout over them, but the feedback screeched through the mic. I set down another document, copies of the HOA's delinquent filings, the trespass photos, and the developer proposal with her signature overlapping my parcel. "This is what you've been hiding," I said. "You used HOA authority to push a private development. You trespassed, forged notices, and weaponized fines, and you did it while the corporation was suspended." Her face drained of color. She turned toward Russ, who stared at the table like it might swallow him whole. Frank leaned back, whispering, "That's mate." But I wasn't finished. "I'm not pressing charges today," I said into the silence. "Yet, but I am offering a deal, one that benefits everyone here." Lacey, seated near the back, nodded once. The offer was simple: reform or exposure. I outlined it slowly, voice steady over the rain that had started tapping the roof. Immediate resignation of Karen and any board member tied to the development. Election of an interim committee supervised by the county ombud's office. Transparent budget audit for the past 3 fiscal years. Term limits of 4 years per board member, no consecutive presidencies. Mandatory open records policy for all HOA proceeding. Sayu. The room went dead silent, except for the rain and the squeak of folding chairs as people turned to look at one another. Karen finally spoke, voice brittle. "You don't have the authority." "Actually," I said, "as of last week, I hold the controlling interest in the HOA's insurance bond through an assignment from the underwriter. They can't renew coverage without my consent." That was my secret leverage. Reversal number 1. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Insurance coverage meant liability protection. Without it, they couldn't legally operate. I could see the realization ripple through her like a cold wave. "Effective immediately," I said. "I recommend suspension of board operations until compliance is restored." Deputy Mason turned to Karen. "You might want to take his advice." Outside, thunder cracked. Inside, the first ballots hit the collection box. Names of interim members scrawled in ballpoint ink. If you've ever been to one of these HOA meetings, you know how fast a crowd can turn. Comment below, should board terms have hard limits, or should communities vote indefinitely? I'm genuinely curious where you draw the line. By the time the storm broke, Karen had left the building. Just walked out, umbrella snapping backward in the wind. The remaining members voted unanimously to accept the reform conditions pending legal verification. Frank exhaled. "That's one for the books." "Not yet," I said. "They'll come for me next. Reputation, credibility, watch the smear start tonight." And I was right. Within hours, a new Facebook group appeared. Save Pinecrest. Stop Corporate Greed. Posts claimed I was flipping the property for profit, that I'd tricked the community. Same tired pattern, new mask. Lacey called again. "Ignore it. Focus on the audit. Truth erases noise." But truth needed witnesses, and tomorrow I plan to get some. Morning smelled like mud and ozone, the aftermath of last night's thunder. The hall was quiet now, but online, the war had gone loud. My phone buzzed every few minutes. Anonymous messages, edited screenshots, even a claim that I'd bribed the deputy. It was amateur theater, but in a small community, rumors don't need truth to travel. Frank brought over the local paper. "Front page," he said, tossing it on the porch table. "HOA showdown at Pinecrest Lakes. Ownership dispute sparks reform." The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Me holding the forged notice mid-air. Karen mid-yell behind me. "Congratulations," Frank said, half grinning. "You just became the face of every angry homeowner in the county." Let's hope that's good for something. We met with Lacey later that afternoon in her cramped downtown office. She had 3 monitors running, each showing different county records. Her sleeves were rolled up, ink stains fresh on her wrists. "Audit's already pulling teeth," she said. 2 years of unfiled invoices, missing receipts, duplicate vendor payments. Classic HOA shell game. "Criminal?" I asked. "Close. We'll let the numbers decide." She looked up. "You ready for the next hit?" "What now?" "They're planning an emergency meeting to rescind your reform deal, claiming you coerced them under duress." Frank laughed so hard he coughed. "Duress? She forged a government document." Lacey smirked. "Doesn't matter. Optics. They'll push it." I leaned forward. "Then we go bigger. We publish." Lacey raised a brow. "You sure?" "Yeah. Let's drag sunlight through their ledger." She nodded slowly. "Then I'll need one more piece. Your consent to release the insurer assignment publicly. That'll trigger their compliance review." "Do it." That night, I drafted a press release and sent it to the county paper and the regional homeowners advocacy site. Headline: Suspended HOA accused of forgery and fraud. Insurer steps in. Lacey made sure every claim was backed by evidence. Timestamps, photos, certified copies. By morning, it was everywhere. News vans rolled up the road, cameras glinting in the wet sunlight. Karen stayed silent, but her allies filled Facebook with fury. The board's vice president even knocked on my door, red-faced. "You're destroying this community," he shouted. "No," I said evenly. "I'm rebuilding it. You just don't like the blueprint." The retaliation came next, the harassment montage in full swing. I woke to code inspectors measuring my dock. That afternoon, a wellness check visit from sheriff's deputies after an anonymous call claiming I'd made threats. Then a certified letter accusing me of creating a hostile environment. I logged it all, each event stamped, photographed, dated. The folder on my drive grew to 117 entries. The worst hit was personal. Lily called crying one night. Someone had posted my address and phone number online. "Dad, they're saying you stole from veterans." "It's lies, honey, all of it." "But why?" "Because they're scared." Silence. Then softly, "Don't quit." That single sentence grounded me. The next morning, Frank dropped off 2 boxes of old HOA meeting minutes he'd salvaged from a neighbor's garage. "They were tossing these," he said. "Figured you'd want them." Inside those yellowing binders, I found the smoking gun, a 2019 entry referencing a $48,000 Community Enhancement Reserve transferred to a private LLC registered to Karen's nephew. The kicker, no receipts, no vote recorded. "Gotcha," I whispered. That discovery became the keystone of reversal number 1. I now held proof not just of procedural rot, but financial misconduct. I didn't flaunt it yet. Timing, as Lacey always said, wins wars. Here's a question I want you to think about. If your HOA used your dues for private gain, would you sue or would you push for reform from within? Drop your take below. Real homeowners need to see both sides. I kept documents. Ting. Every knock, every rumor, every notice. Sleep became a memory. My fear wasn't for myself anymore. It was for the precedent. If they could fake ownership to build profit once, they'd do it again to someone else. June bled into July. The audit neared completion, and whispers spread that county regulators were circling. Then came the email I'd been waiting for. Subject line: Preliminary findings, misappropriation indicators. Lacey's message was short. "We're ready. Set piece in 72 hours. Public hearing confirmed." I closed my laptop, heart thudding like a drum. Outside, the lake was still as glass, the dock reflecting the fading sky. Tomorrow night, the storm would move from rumor to record. The county courthouse smelled like dust and burnt coffee. Rows of metal chairs filled the public hearing room, the air thick with the tension of too many secrets ready to burst. Cameras lined the back wall, local reporters, homeowners, even a few curious onlookers clutching their phones like talismans. At the front, the county compliance officer, Dana Brooks, adjusted her glasses and looked over the agenda. This hearing concerns alleged misconduct by the Pinecrest Lakes Homeowners Association and related parties. Mr. Ellis, you're listed as the complainant. You may proceed. I stood, palms damp but steady. The microphone's metal was cold against my knuckles. This isn't about paint or parking. It's about power, money, and trust. For 2 years, this HOA operated without legal standing. They levied fines, issued liens, and forged county documents, all while funneling thousands of dollars to private entities controlled by board members. A murmur swept through the crowd. Karen sat 3 rows ahead, her posture rigid, lips pressed so tight they seemed drawn in pencil. I placed the binder on the table, every tab color-coded, every exhibit numbered. Exhibit A, state records confirming administrative default. Exhibit B, the forged stop work notice. Exhibit C, meeting minutes from 2019 showing $48,000 transferred to a private LLC owned by a family member of the president. Dana raised her brows. "These have been verified?" Lacey, seated beside me, spoke evenly. "Yes, each document carries certification or timestamp corroboration." Karen stood abruptly. "This is a witch hunt. That transfer was for legitimate community improvements." "Name one," I said quietly. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Dana leaned forward. "Ms. Dalton, please remain seated." The deputy who'd once stood at that HOA hearing, Mason, was stationed by the door again, hands on his belt. He wasn't smiling this time. Dana turned back to me. "Mr. Ellis, you allege retaliatory harassment as well?" "Yes," I said, handing over a thick folder. Anonymous reports filed against me within 48 hours of each major disclosure. Same language patterns, same submission IP address traced to the HOA office router. The crowd erupted in murmurs again. Karen's lawyer whispered furiously in her ear, but she just stared ahead, cheeks blotching red. Dana flipped through the papers, then nodded. "All right. Given the evidence presented, the board's status will be suspended pending full audit and potential criminal referral." That was the public confirmation, the neutral authorities' validation. Visual beat number 2. The sound of the gavel striking, rain starting against the courthouse windows, and Karen's expression collapsing like wet plaster. For the first time in months, I exhaled. The dominoes were falling. Outside, the cameras swarmed. A reporter thrust a mic toward me. "Mr. Ellis, what happens next?" I looked straight into the lens. "We rebuild. This isn't about Revan. It's about restoring faith in the rules that protect us all." By nightfall, the HOA's insurer released a statement suspending their bond coverage, pending investigation into potential fraud and misappropriation. The county ethics office followed with a press release announcing a compliance review for all local associations within 30 days. Frank called, laughing in disbelief. "You lit a wildfire, Mark. They're all scrambling now." "I didn't start it," I said. "I just struck the match where it was already dry." Here's one for the comment thread. When HOA officials commit fraud or harassment, what should the penalty be? Fines, removal, or jail time? Tell me what you think a fair precedent looks like. By the end of that week, 2 board members resigned. Karen tried to claim medical leave, but the county ethics office filed a preliminary finding recommending referral for forgery and misuse of funds. Still, the victory didn't feel clean. My yard was quiet again, but every creak of the dock reminded me of how close they'd come to taking it. Lily visited that weekend. We grilled by the lake, the air heavy with wood smoke and relief. "Grandpa would have been proud," she said. "He'd have told me to mow the lawn," I said, and we both laughed. Yet even in laughter, I knew the final step remained, the reform deal. A victory wasn't justice until the system changed to stop it from repeating. That chance came faster than I expected. The county invited me to a policy drafting session, a new charter for HOA transparency standards. And in that moment, I realized my leverage wasn't just local anymore. The drafting session was held 3 weeks later in a downtown conference room that smelled faintly of toner and optimism. County council, 2 state housing reps, and half a dozen residents sat around a long oak table. Dana Brooks was there too, crisp as ever, with a stack of BYU Inders under her arm. She nodded at me as I took my seat. "Mr. Ellis," she said, "given your recent case, the county would like your input on structural reform standards, specifically accountability measures for homeowners associations." I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say for days, but when I looked around the room, at the mix of tired faces and cautious hope, it came out simpler. "People don't need less governance," I said. "They need honest governance. The rules have to protect residents, not rulers." We spent hours drafting the language. Term limits codified in every set of bylaws. Mandatory open voting on financial decisions. Independent audits every 2 years. And a whistleblower clause shielding any homeowner who reported misconduct. By the end, my hand cramped from signing revisions, but I felt lighter than I had in months. The reversal number 2 was complete. Leverage traded for reform. I'd given up any future claim against the HOA's insurance bond in exchange for full implementation of the county's Community Transparency Charter. They'd also agreed to name the public access section along the shoreline Ellis Landing, preserving it as open space in perpetuity. Frank showed up at the ceremony, khaki vest, thermos in hand. "Guess we got a happy ending," he said, watching the workers hang the new sign by the dock. "Not happy," I said, "just earned." He chuckled. "Same thing sometimes." As the crowd dispersed, Lacey joined us. "For the record," she said, "you just helped change policy in 3 counties. The state's housing board is adopting our draft language next quarter." I stared out at the lake. The water was calm, clear enough to see the outline of the dock posts below the surface. No more shadows hiding under it. If you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future stories reach you first. As citizens, it's on us to keep learning. Keep watching and share stories like this so others know where the lines really are. The paper ran the headline 2 days later. Pinecrest HOA dissolved. New charter passes countywide. Below it, a photo of me and Frank shaking hands beside the Ellis Landing sign. Karen's fate was quieter. She pled to forgery and falsified records, 3 years probation, restitution of the misused funds. Russ resigned and moved 2 towns over. The development deal collapsed. The land reverted to green space. And Pinecrest itself? It found its balance again. Kids biked down the same gravel road that once hosted protest signs. The old boardroom became a community workshop for home repairs and safety training. Once a month I host a legal literacy night there. Free coffee, open floor. People come, talk, argue, learn. Visual beat number 3. The closing shot. The reflection of the new charter plaque in the lake water as dusk settles. The porch light from my cabin glowing steady against the dark. Sometimes when the evening wind moves through the pines, I can almost hear my father's voice. The world can fix itself if you give it room. I think he was right.